Hold on, give me a second. Okay, that's great. Okay, time to introduce you, Wendy. I'm not sure if anybody can still hear me or not, so please away if you can still hear me. Okay, brilliant. So we're doing it without me. I first got in touch with Wendy once I saw Dragonfly, and Linda actually put me in touch and recommended some volunteers to be able to get in touch and speak to further about sort of the topic of mental health in academia, which for some might think that it's sort of slightly saturated with how much it's talked about, but the fact that things are still changing and very, in my opinion, very early in the process of trying to sort of create some real change to the system, I don't think it's a topic that can necessarily be talked about enough. So we were lucky enough to have a podcast episode with, if you haven't listened, if you go onto the Scientistt page, onto our podcast or onto social media, you can check that out afterwards, which was full and sort of, I always think it's great with topics to be able to actually get to know the person that is giving you advice or leading things. And it was brilliant to find out Wendy's motivations behind what she does and things like that. And then to get a workshop where we can then sort of put some of that background knowledge into really and sort of flesh out the bones a little bit is a great opportunity that I couldn't really pass up on either. So without further ado, Wendy, would you like to sort of introduce yourself? Go ahead with sharing your screen or anything that you'd like to do, and everybody can save up their time.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. And I wasn't exactly sure what to expect and what kind of audience there would be or what people's interests are. So I'm a very adaptable human and happy to kind of take it in whatever direction you all want. I'd love for this to be very interactive. If you want me to just kind of go ahead and present a whole bunch of stuff and then we can talk about things, we can do it that way too. So you're the drivers, let me know. I have I have some slides. I have a presentation that is one of the things that Dragonfly Mental Health delivers as often one of the first things we do when we work with campuses, which is a mental health literacy talk. So I'm just going to use those slides, but we can go into it or keep going or, pause at any point and just completely go in a different direction if that's where you all would like to go. So feel free to unmic or unmute yourself and just, call something out or raise your hand either way. And I'll try to pay attention to both of those. Does that sound okay? Okay, great. Then I'll share my screen. But again, if it kind of turns into just a discussion, I can turn them off at any time. So. So generally speaking, this is kind of the outline of what the mental health literacy talk would be that we, that we present. And so it does include a personal and a Dragonfly mental health introduction. I delineate what the talk is supposed to be and what it's not. And then the talk itself has, just to see if you want me to go through it or not, and into what detail. I talk first about what we at Dragonfly like to think about to frame the spectrum from mental health to crisis. And then this talk has a surface level. It's designed to be only like 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And so it's just kind of the surface of mood disorders and anxiety, psychosis, substance abuse, autism spectrum disorder, burnout, and OCD. Not exactly in that order, but these are all things that can happen, and some of them are more enriched in academic populations. So that's what we touch on in this talk. And then, and I can go into any level of detail into all of those topics if you'd like. And then we talk a little bit about mental health in academia specifically, a little bit more why it does seem to be an underserved population, a more difficult population to belong to. And it has to do with culture and climate and a lot of the stigma around it. I also have a couple slides just emphasizing the diversity of experience people have. So I'll just launch there. And again, anybody at any time, please feel free to interrupt or ask more questions or ask me to elaborate, and we can go from there. So I hope that sounds good. So my name is Wendy Ingram. I do have a PhD in molecular and cell biology. I received that degree from UC Berkeley, but I've been engaged in research. I was a biochemistry and molecular biophysics major as an undergrad, as well as studied psychology at University of Arizona. And I've always been interested in psychiatric illness and was actually pre-med, and then decided to go into basic science as a researcher because I was really personally unsatisfied with how little we knew and understood about the etiologies or the causes of psychiatric illness, how the drugs or the therapies worked. One of the things that a lot of people, especially scientists, are a little bit baffled about is how therapy, talk therapy, or cognitive behavioral therapy changes the biology of your brain. But it does. The research is there, and so it is a really powerful modality of treatment. And in a lot of places, a lot of cases, that's actually the best way to treat various illnesses, even though they are in your. The brain is so unique in the fact that you use the brain in order to change the brain, which I love. I'm a total brain geek. So so I've been interested in psychiatric illness from molecules to populations. And so for my postdoc, I went to first a hospital system and then Johns Hopkins to study psychiatric epidemiology. So I'm trained in bioinformatics, medical informatics. We use big data, large electronic health records longitudinally over time, just tons and tons and tons of information from lab reports to imaging to what different diagnoses that people have had and what they present to, say, the emergency room for or their PCP for. And so we can use those as researchers and scientists to better understand the diversity of the course of disease, as well as predict who's going to respond to kind of what treatments. So those are the research things that I'm really interested in. As an aside, I studied Toxoplasma gondii as a graduate student, which is a brain parasite that makes mice lose their innate hardwired fear of cat smells. So I've always been interested in, even though I was doing basic science for my PhD, it did have to do with the brain behavior, the immune system. So I love all of those nitty-gritty details and thinking about how that applies to human specific diseases. So in addition to my research, I have over the years co-created, I am by no means on my own in any of these endeavors, but some peer-led organizations, first at UC Berkeley and then at Johns Hopkins University. And so these all were focused on creating change or filling gaps in what the university or what our department was giving us. The worst case scenario is why I really got into doing both of those. The first was we lost a classmate to suicide in 2013, and a group of us students got together to create a peer network. We called it the MCB Grad Network, and yesterday, Dragonfly hosted a build your own or organize your own peer network. We filmed it, and it was a workshop about an hour long. We filmed the whole thing and are going to be posting that online for anybody who's interested in building their own within their own institution. In 2018, one of my classmates and really close friends that helped build that network at Berkeley, we lost to suicide. They were a postdoc at UCSF at the time. And so it just keeps happening and it's not okay. And so I've been really motivated to take what were kind of my advocacy efforts in my free time and make that my primary activity now. So with an amazing, incredible set of people from around the world, we founded Dragonfly Mental Health, which is a global organization focused on sustainably and impactfully changing and improving the mental health among academics worldwide. So that's about me. So Dragonfly Mental Health has a few different things, domains that it works in. We're all researchers. Basically everyone has, well, we're predominantly researchers. We also have some lawyers, we have some people from business, we have various, it's across the board. We have clinicians who are all interested. Anyone who gets a postgraduate education is considered, an academic and welcome here. Even people who are aspiring to, if they're still an undergrad, we welcome them. But we conduct research and we are trying to figure out a way to address the systemic issues within academia that are causing problems for people's mental health. We also host something a little bit similar to this, which is a Dragonfly Cafe. So we have 3 live events a week and then we have a Slack space where people can asynchronously connect with each other and share resources. But it's a safe place for academics to come together and talk about their mental health, their successes, their failures, or just network with amazing people from around the world and build community in a time where we are really, unfortunately, isolated. And this cafe, the Dragonfly Cafe, is a place where these are other academics. They get it. They understand where you're coming from because they are in it or going through it or have gone through it themselves. So it's a great place. I like it. So then the third thing, and what this particular slide deck that I have here today is our on-campus program. So we think that they're kind of these general or universal solutions that people come up with or universities try to create. And honestly, a lot of these things either, miss the mark because academic communities are so unique, just department to department, discipline to discipline, even just, depending on the size of the program. If you have 6 faculty in your program versus 90, that can be a really big difference in how that organization and that culture is built, and how much influence one individual can have on it. So we have created, we're designing, creating, constantly adding to our on-campus programs that are available either a la carte or through these like 3-year comprehensive programs that we're starting to offer. And so with these, we go to a community, we figure out what their specific needs are, where their readiness to change is, and then we try to create that cultural and climate change that needs to happen. And so we do that through what we've identified as essentially 5 domains of excellence. So if a department or a university or a school of medicine or something like that, whatever the unit is, has excellent mental health or wants to cultivate ongoing excellent mental health among their faculty, among their academics, learners, among their staff, everyone is included in our view of academia. They really need to have kind of 3 points, 2 of which are people-based. One is the student network or a peer network. That's what we talked about, us students doing on our own. But if there's not a departmental standing committee that's focused on this, that has representation from all levels within the department, that is mandated by the department to care about, monitor, and make sure that ongoing awareness and all the other things that are needed are happening and continue to happen. You'll lag over time. So it shouldn't be a faculty peer group or a student peer group. It really needs to involve the department itself saying that it cares and putting people and money where its mouth is, so to speak. And then the 3 other pieces that are really key to cultivating excellent mental health, and this is from research, this is from epidemiological research. How do you improve mental health in a community? How do you improve help seeking? How do you improve access to care and accessing care? And it has to do with improving mental health literacy, fighting stigma, which is different than just giving people information. You actually have to root out and tell stories and get people to discuss and reflect on their own stigmas, both internal and societal. And then skills workshops. So giving people the skills to be able to recognize signs and symptoms, to be able to talk to people that they think might be struggling, to be able to refer them, to be able to interact with them without being invasive, but also being open to helping somebody, not saving them. It's no one's responsibility to save anyone. You honestly, you can't, but you can be there. You can create a culture where people are more open, more willing, less worried about negative repercussions, by being open and honest about what's going on for them. And then that's how we can all be better off, is move away from crisis and towards prevention. So I'm going to pause there for a sec and see if on this fabulous slide of all of our, not all of our wonderful volunteers, but a selection of our wonderful volunteers, you know, just to emphasize that it's not me. It's so many amazing people, literally from all over the world. We've got representation from 15 different countries, over 25 universities, and lots of different disciplines too. So that's about me. That's about Dragonfly. The rest of the talk, the rest of the slides are kind of more along that mental health literacy vein. And so I can go deeper into that, or, you know, we could pause and have a chat and just talk about whatever you all would like to. Is there any preference or ideas? Also, I have a big screen and my camera over here, but then my laptop's over here. So I'm kind of going back and forth. That's why I look that direction.
I was wondering, Wendy, if I could just ask a really quick question.
Absolutely.
So I was just wondering, obviously you sort of spoke experience of your motivations for obviously why mental health advocacy and things like that. But I was wondering, in the process of deciding that you need to do something to then getting to now at the point you're at, what's been the biggest barrier to entry? Is it something to do with the institutions, or is it sort of actually getting information out to individuals? And do you think it is?
That's a really great question. So yeah, so it's been kind of an interesting, organic, ongoing process to figure out how, from my previous mental health advocacy efforts, we're kind of always responding to a situation and new information. And whereas now with Dragonfly, we're like taking all of that experience and then the experience of other volunteers who've, you know, engaged in this space too, and coalescing it into models and organized kind of procedures and, you know, the 5 domains of excellence and stuff like that. Like I didn't start with that, but so I'll kind of pin a few different points in the process that I kind of mentioned. And so when we first lost our friend to suicide in 2013, we as students had realized, one of the biggest realizations was that we as students had so much self-stigma that so many of us were in therapy seeking care for ourselves. Many, you know, were still choosing not to because they didn't want to feel weak or seem weak, or didn't want to let on. And what we realized in the wake of Paul's death was that we weren't telling each other. We told each other everything. We spent all our free time together. We spent all our scientific time together. We were so close. And I was in a cohort of 56 people, and then the class above us and the class under us, like, you know, we were really, so it was even a larger group, closer to 100 people that were all really, really close with one another, except about our struggles. Everyone kind of had this like, I'm fine. Are you fine? I'm fine. I'm totally fine. Like kind of thing about our mental health, our emotional health, how we were doing. And a very select few people knew about anybody's struggles. And so that was one of the things where we were like, oh, okay, so the biggest issue is that no one feels comfortable talking about this. So that's what we addressed first with that student network. Was we set up a series of we called them fireside chats. They're basically like panels of other students who, were, at various places in their career and then their programs, and designed them for each kind of big transition point in grad school. So rotating in a lab is one of the things we do in biology in the US. And so you get to go through 3 different labs and try them out. Then you pick a lab. And so we had events at both of those points. And then we had a point for studying for quals and basically giving people a heads up, not only about like, okay, here's the logistics, here's what you have to do, prep them and, tell them it's going to be awful, but also talk about, it can affect your physicality, it can affect your sleep, it can affect your life, it can affect your relationships. Talk about these things. And if it's getting bad, that's not okay. Don't, you have to struggle through it because it's going to be a hard, challenging thing you need to do. But if you get to, you have to be careful and not normalize the struggle, the unnecessary struggle. So there's necessary struggle, there's good stress, so to speak, that like really promotes people really understanding and their project, what they're proposing. But then there's this other side of, which is a weird gray area transition zone into, oh, I'm not sleeping at all. I've become completely insomniac. Or I, half the people in our class gained weight and half the people lost weight. Some people lost way too much weight. And it like, so knowing that, oh, well, sometimes it can affect the stress can affect your sleep or your dreams or your weight, appetite. But giving people permission to talk to each other and depend on one another to also seek out, hey, I don't think that I'm supposed to be this bad. What do you think? And then getting support, getting connected with care rather than waiting until you basically turn like, either sleep through your qualifying exam or you could have, end up with an emotional breakdown, which is not how you want to do your oral exams either. So it's something that this real talk, that self-stigma, that secrecy around mental health struggles was one of the things that we focused on pretty early. I'll go back to sharing if we want to go back to sharing, but the other point so that was where like the peer network of like peer support, peer to peer, like no faculty allowed, what's said in this room stays in this room kind of thing, was the first thing that we just by necessity figured out that's what we wanted to do, because that was the first issue that really came up for us. When my friend Chris died, Chris had a dragonfly tattoo, which is our logo. So that's why we're called Dragonfly Mental Health, is in honor of my friend Chris. When Chris died, I started talking to our old department that we were both in, we both alumni from, at UC Berkeley, and they wanted to do something, but they didn't know exactly what, and they really weren't in a place, they were at a place where like, they were like, yes, mental health's important. We also don't know what to do about it. And so I ended up talking to a number of faculty and a number of students, and kind of got the impression that a lot of people didn't have clear information about mental health struggles. A fair number of people were like, well, it's mostly just it's like weakness, it's laziness, right? Like, and that's kind of the more extreme views that I was getting, but like people didn't, even though they were molecular and cell biologists, I was like, no. We know a lot about this. Like, you're missing information. You don't realize that this is a biologically driven and emotionally influenced set of illnesses, just like any other. Oh, we can fix that. So that's why I designed so we came up with the idea of me coming to a departmental retreat and presenting a depression awareness talk, where we went deep into the details of the immunological response that has been, so there's a whole bunch of immune cytokines that can cause sickness behavior, which essentially translates to depression-like behavior, especially if it's going on way too long, or at the wrong at the wrong time. So when you get the flu, you you end up sleeping more, having disrupted sleep, you feel achy all over, you actually have physical aches, you become more foggy in your brain, you don't really want to be around people, and all of those things are caused by your own immune system cytokines basically telling your body to like sit down, shut up, and go hide in a corner while we fight off this bacteria or this virus or whatever it is. And so your own immune system though is the thing making you feel all those things. We inject you with interleukin-6 and you're going to feel those things. No virus, no bacteria at all. So kind of putting it into those contexts and filling them in on the things that, I'm a scientist. I was like, oh, you're missing knowledge? I can give you knowledge. Like that was where the mental health literacy talks came from. And we measured them and saw, did you learn new things? Was this new information for you? Does it help with your understanding and, your views on how real and how treatable mental illnesses, depression, mood disorders, things like that are? And the answer was yes. So we got all this data and we're able to see that it really affected knowledge, which was great. We also measured if it affected stigma, and it didn't. And so that's where the next step, kind of the piece of the puzzle, the piece of the wheel of wellness came from, was that we realized that we didn't move the needle on stigma. Having all the information in the world is great, but if you still feel like you're going to get judged by others, or that you don't deserve to get treatment because you're not so bad that you can't, so that person's way worse than I am, so I shouldn't take resources. This kind of like hesitation to seek care, and having it wrapped up in not showing weakness, even if you know it's a biological disease. The stigma is something deeper, like below logic and reason. And so we decided to try to come up with a solution for that.
Yes, just a question on that thing, because that's something that I think is quite interesting, specifically in the context of academia that we're talking about. Because from my experience, that stigma exists sort of in general. There's sort of stigma around mental health and people having thoughts such as what you just mentioned. But do you think that it's intensive setting and sort of in an environment that a PhD student or researcher would find themselves in? Do you find that the stigma is in, and this not showing weakness, do you think that that's heightened by sort of the general atmosphere of academia and the competitive nature and sort of strain of the job, if that makes sense?
Yes. So one of the things we always do is everything that we deliver to campuses is customized for that community, and we engage with them, or at least like strongly encourage them to engage with their own population and get anonymous feedback about what are the barriers, what is the stigma that they're dealing with, why would they not seek treatment, is it just access to care, or is it because you know that your PI wouldn't, you've actually asked, and your PI or your mentor won't give you time off in the middle of a day on Wednesday to go to a therapist. You'd get ridiculed, or you suspect that they would write a worse letter of recommendation for you. These are all things people have said. And one of the things that was really amazing, and I was like, oh, we can address this first, was that a lot of students were coming up to me after my mental health literacy talks and saying, a lot of that resonated with me. I didn't even realize that irritability was a sign or symptom of depression, or, I've really been feeling nothing at all, and it's been scary, but no one's ever put words to it for me before, but what I'm really terrified about is that means I'm not going to make it, that I don't have what it takes to make it in academia, because, like you were saying, the culture is culture of overwork. Everyone's bragging about, how many emails they answer a day, and how, they answer them at 2 a.m. no matter what. And they're so committed. Like people are, whether they're doing it or not, for real or not, people talk about how much they're getting overworked, not how much time they take or what kind of breaks they do in order to maintain their work-life balance, like to fend off burnout, to prevent having another episode of depression. And what happened at the same time as all these students were coming up to me telling me their fears, that what the core fear being, I don't have what it takes, I'm not going to make it, I'm doing all this work, there's no way I can live up to the image of how resilient and hardcore and literally like sleep deprived everyone must all be in order to do any good science. Faculty were coming up to me and telling me all kinds of struggles that they've had. And so faculty, amazing faculty, were coming up to me and telling me about their depression, their lifelong depression, their struggles with anxiety, experiencing panic attacks, having like serious imposter syndrome. Like some of the people who came up to me and told me that they had, imposter symptoms themselves, I'm like, but you're you. Wow. And the students have no idea that's true. And I was like, okay, we can fix this. Y'all need to talk. But it's really, really hard to have those conversations and to orchestrate real life events and discussions and panels. And so instead we went with films. So I sent out a blanket invitation to all of Johns Hopkins School of Public Health faculty, inviting them to, if anyone had lived experience with mental health struggles or experience, supporting someone close to them who had struggled, that they would be willing to talk about, what that was like, what the impact on their job was, how they got through it and became the impressive faculty member at an impressive university that they were today, and what advice they would have for students to help fight stigma. 17 faculty said yes in a week. I interviewed all of them. I'm very I'm very greedy when it comes to information and stories and things like this. So I basically set all my research aside for 2 weeks and just filmed everybody who would be willing to talk about it. And we've crafted all these different films, short ones with just a couple of people, a little bit longer ones with maybe 6 or 7 people, and shown them in a variety of different ways at Hopkins. And then we did the same thing again at UC Berkeley. And UC Berkeley has only about 90 faculty. And when I told them about this project and pitched it to them, they were like, oh, but no, we're way too small. The School of Public Health has hundreds and hundreds of faculty in the whole school. That's 10 departments. You're asking just molecular and cell biology department? No one's gonna say yes. 6 faculty, actually 7 faculty said yes in a week. So and they ranged from being junior faculty, non-tenured yet, getting ready to apply for tenure, to previous heads of the department. So it's when you create the space for people to tell their stories, and to support others that might be going through a similar struggle, they come out of the woodwork, and they have huge compassion for others because they've been through it themselves. And so showing those films at retreats, and then facilitating discussion around it, and what were you surprised by? What kind of stigma is coming up for you that you realize you have now? How does this change your views? It's tremendously impactful. So that changed stigma.
No, it's really interesting because I think it sort of goes on to a slightly different question. You were mentioning stigma and sort of people putting things out on social media, and we had an event, I don't think it might have even been last week, maybe the week before, I can't, it was about tackling imposter syndrome and sort of advice, or feel like you're not good enough or feel like you're not worthy. And we got into a little bit of a discussion about social media and how is the academic Twitter community something that's really positive, and it's such a great force for change and supporting each other, celebrating successes, but then equally depending sort of who you follow, how much time you spend on it, how you put people without actually physically knowing them or even chat to them on a Zoom call. it can be quite a dangerous place to sort of perceive that you're not good enough or other people are all doing something. And I think it's the same with talking about mental health, in the sense that I often see a lot of people that will tweet things and separating what is sort of genuine qualified advice is just giving it, and equally when to sort of get it from somebody that's something that they need to put out there for their own mental health and support, and say, this is an achievement that I did, this is brilliant, I'm really proud of myself, which I think is fantastic. But then how that could be perceived to 10, 20, 30 other people, actually, I have something that I should be doing. I think it's quite a double-edged sword in that sense, and it's that that I myself sort of know an answer to. Does anyone else have sort of any thoughts on that sort of thing, as people that I'm sure are, or any social media in that sense?
Yeah, I'd say I can really agree with that. Like, I think it goes two ways as well. So, for example, someone might, as you mentioned, I think Twitter, especially if you follow only certain accounts and certain community, it can amplify certain things. So either if you're a non-PhD students looking at academic Twitter and saying all the negative things about PhDs, mental health, and like everything, that can then put you off. And then sometimes, people sharing very positive things if we're going through a low time and thinking, oh, people seem to be getting really good results and things like that. Why is it only me? Am I really bad for this? Something like that. So I think, yeah, both is in my opinion.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that, and there's similarities between kind of what happens on Twitter and what happens, in a department that kind of sets the culture and like how students feel. Like, so when I was giving the mental health literacy talks at Berkeley, a lot of the students felt that across the board, they were like, faculty don't give a shit about us. We're like, not everybody, but like that was kind of the general thing of like, they care about our productivity. They don't care about us as people. And on the other side, I was again getting like all these faculty coming up and being like, I really want to help them. I don't know what to say. I don't want to be invasive. I don't want to say the wrong thing. And I was like, okay, this is, again, like a misnomer. And it relates to kind of social media, and whoever's the loudest is who sets the culture. I mean, look at the US right now. It's not reflective of the true diversity, and as well as like the silent majority, whoever that is. And so what I was finding was that the vast majority of faculty cared, but felt hesitant to talk to their students, and didn't know how to exactly, encourage them to take care of themselves, but also encourage them to work really hard to do their work and to get better and to train in these really, really challenging fields that do require a lot of work. And so faculty, the bulk of faculty, were quiet about it. And then there was like a couple of people who would just pop off and say shitty, horrible things, and everybody rolls their eyes, but eye rolls don't get the message across, of we really genuinely care about you. We want you to do better. And so that's where kind of the third piece of skills training, identifying where the hesitation's coming from and then addressing that. So so that's why one of our workshops that we created was a active listening training, focused training. So give faculty the permission, the phrases to start those conversations, and then the skills to continue them and end them in the right way. And that really has changed a lot of people's perspectives, confidence in being able to talk to students, and also willingness to speak up too, when, so-and-so, Dr. like Grumpy Pants over here, like starts spouting off that students are snowflakes these days and like people will shut them down now. And so I feel like, no, they're not. They're great. Like, I can't imagine, like, I'm amazed how much they know in comparison to what I knew when I started my PhD. So people can actually, when you give them within the culture a space to have both and not make it all or nothing. Like, so, and also mandating people to, every single faculty member, whoever has a struggle, should disclose their struggles. Like, no, it's up to absolutely every single student and faculty member what they're willing to share, with whom, when, under what circumstances. It is very personal, and it should be 100% put up to them. So that also needs to be acknowledged regularly enough that when somebody discloses and people are like, more people should disclose, it's like, a lot of people have struggles and they don't feel comfortable, and it's their choice. But we can also facilitate discussions around this, give people who are willing to talk about it in the right circumstances that platform.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just conscious at the time, does anybody else have any other questions at all? Feel free to go for it.
Well, I think what you just said there was very important, and it kind of goes back to a really bad thing in academia where they have a habit of just not training anyone for anything really. And
Captain Pipetting.
Yeah, just being like, when it comes to management and organization and people and everything, they kind of just like figure it out, you know. And yeah, it's definitely a problem, because obviously I'm super open about my mental health and everything with myself, but I noticed that when I deal with advisors or people who are faculty in academia, they get very taken back because I am so open. And in the academic mindset, it's, yeah, you can talk about these things when you have tenure, and before that there's no point in trying to change anything.
That is exactly what I was advised by a number of people when I was floating the idea of like creating Dragonfly, and doing this instead of like going tenure track, because I knew how much work tenure is. So I wasn't, I knew that I wouldn't be able to put the time and the effort and the energy needed into this that it would require. And so I was starting to float the idea as, like, a lot of people were like, no, do it after tenure. You can't you can't do that now. Like, you actually have a chance. You're one of the 10% of people who can actually get a tenure track job at a good university. Like, please don't wait until after tenure. And I'm like, really? Like, that is just such a sad, ridiculous fallacy too, because like magically getting tenure doesn't suddenly turn every single person into like a social justice warrior, where like suddenly they're like, all right, gloves are coming off. Like, now we're going to talk about diversity and inclusion. Like, I mean, that doesn't happen. They're exhausted. They have so much on their plate. They have a huge lab with multiple grants, presumably, that they're, in order to have gotten tenure, that now they have to navigate and organize. And again, they had no training on how to manage labs, manage budgets, like do all these things. They're completely inundated, and they're junior. Even though they're tenured, they still are only assistant professors. They're not full professors. And so if they want to get full professorship, that's another 5, 7, 10 years or something. And you have to get all the things in place for that. And so, I mean, it's a fallacy. It's a wait till all the old crotchety sex offender professors die, then science will be great. Then we won't have any bullies. And I'm like, nah.
Just another question that's just come up in the chat. Sort of, if you always want to be sort of kind and respectful to everybody, but you deal with a situation where somebody is overtly competitive with you, or maybe, I suppose another way to ask the question is, how do you deal with being in a competitive environment?
The way I deal with it is I have done a ton of self work, both with like therapists as well as kind of more self-helpy type things, or communities that are focused on self-actualization kind of vein of things, where after, like, I had a really hard time in grad school, and by about third year, like, I was at my wit's end. I was considering switching labs, at year 3 is a terrible time to switch labs, but it was so bad that I was considering it. I loved my project, but the people in my lab were the ones that were causing, well, one person was causing, just to the point where I was never okay. I wasn't sleeping. My, mental health struggles were exacerbated, all these different things. And that's when I was like, all right, I'm cutting out working on weekends. I am going to focus on me. I'm going to focus on figuring out how to not have my ego and my self-worth determined by other people's opinions and other people's shit, basically. And there's a lot of tropes out there, whatever. There's like all these little memes and things and stuff that are meaningful, but just reading it isn't enough. You really have to do the work, evaluate stuff, dig it out from your own psyche so that you aren't goaded by someone telling you you're not good enough, or, doing those jabs or little digs at you or something. Building your own self-worth so that it's not dependent on either someone's criticism or someone's praise. And that was one of the things that for me really was super important for me to figure out, was that I didn't get a lot of criticism. I was very lucky. I'm high achiever, blah, blah, blah. But then I was also if I didn't get the praise, then I was worried. And then when someone finally came at me and was just like a bully and decided they hated me for, I still don't know why, that crushed me. And I realized that it was both of those things, and I needed to have knowledge. Even if no one in the world ever knew what I was doing, I needed to be confident that I did it the right way. I was proud of it, regardless of criticism or praise. So that was something for me that really I ended up spending a lot of time on during grad school after third, fourth year, and also learning mandolin. Starting a new activity where you are super going to suck at the beginning, and then you get better over time, is also a very therapeutic thing to do, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, no, that sounds like great advice. Just conscious of the time and what we're on at the moment. If anyone has any sort of final comments, feel free to just unmute your spin. But I just wanted to say thank you very much, Wendy, for taking the time out. We've called upon you a couple of times in the last 2 weeks to get involved with Scientistt, and I can't thank you enough for reaching out and being able to do it. And obviously, what you've built, I think, obviously I can only speak for myself, but I think it's extremely impressive. Not just speak about something, but to and actually create something that has gained a lot of momentum, and hopefully a lot more momentum to come into the future. And I think it's the case of, I'd like to say anyway, getting a few universities and institutions on board, and then people very quickly seeing all and how Dragonfly can help students and things like that. And then I can see it completely snowballing, and I'm feeling like, not that it's an obligation, but that it's something that they actually really want to do, to be able to support their students, and building it into something that happens annually or whatever. So yeah, I think it's brilliant, and you're definitely going down an exciting track. I'm looking for it. And likewise, everybody else attending, hopefully you can be able to take at least one thing from what's spoken about, and then take that into your sort of locality or your own research group, institution, wherever you're at, and be able to sort of relay some of the positivity and refer people to Dragonfly if necessary, and the resources and things like that. Because as shown in the poll, a lot of people are in places where you'd imagine. So if you are to do something like that, hopefully everybody has a place to go now. And likewise, the recording of this presentation will be on the Scientistt platform in the video section. So if people have missed it, then they can go there and look at it and check it out. So yeah, thank you very much, Wendy. Has to have anything else that you'd like to sort of finish with?
No, yeah,
I'll finish with this slide.
Perfect.
So we'd love for anybody to get involved in any way that they'd like. Come join us at Dragonfly Cafe, learn a little bit more, get to know folks. volunteer if you like. We have a kind of sign up interest Google form. And then if you do want to bring us on campus in any way, shape, or form, or just start a conversation about that, feel free to reach out to us too. All of these links are also on our website on the various pages. So we would love to be we'd love to grow. And the only way that if this does snowball, which we're hoping, that we're actually going to be able to serve all of these people and groups around the world, is to bring in other people who want to give these talks, want to deliver these workshops, want to engage within their own community in order to do these things. So we're training Dragonfly ambassadors to deliver our talks, to do things. We'll help organize everything and the data collection and scheduling and stuff, but we pay our speakers and consultants for each one that they do. So we also feel very strongly about fair pay and transparency, which a lot of people in academia are not used to. So yeah, so that would be my final invitation.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Hassan, did you have anything that you wanted to say?
No, I think it's really great, and I'm really interested in the Dragonfly Cafe as well. So I would like to learn a bit about that with you, possibly collaboration maybe, because we're also thinking about setting up something like, we had complaints about PhD students feeling lonely when they're writing the thesis, things like that. So thinking of like co-working spaces and companies like that. So like, yeah, there could be some of kind of synergy through that. And I'm also writing on a blog for Student Mind. So Mind is a big mental health organization in the UK, and like one of the things that they spoke about, like they have resources for students and undergraduates. But as you mentioned in your talk, postdocs, PhD students in the lab, they're like one of the big group that is completely ignored by universities because they put all their effort and money into their undergraduates, and PhD students are not even considered as staff or students. They're stuck in between. So I think like, yeah, having something like Dragonfly, like local champions just for things like that would be, yeah, I think it's a perfect idea.
Awesome. Cool. I look forward to chatting more.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's great. Thank you, Hassan. Just make sure you stop recording before I end the call, because I don't actually know what happens just in case.